Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and it's time to take a look at all of the blue cards in Hour of Devastation. Now, if you didn't see the first video, if you're new to my set reviews, 3 quick disclaimers. Number 1, this is a limited set review. I'm talking about draft. I'm talking about sealed. I don't care if this card is amazing in Legacy or Standard or Vintage or Commando or whatever. That's not what these grades are for. They're for limited. Number 2, these are my first glance impressions, me rating these partially in a vacuum, but partially with the knowledge that we will be playing with a pack of Amonkhet as well. These are how I'm going to approach these cards at the pre-release. These are how I'm going to approach these cards at my first draft, etc. Ratings may change. That's the beauty of Magic. It's basically impossible for you to know how every single card is going to be just by looking at it at first. You got to play with some of them. And number 3, this is to encourage discussion. I am not telling you that these are the absolute correct ratings and you better follow them. I do these set reviews because I want to hear your ratings. I want discussion with me. I want discussion amongst yourselves. This should encourage discussion. But with those disclaimers, let's jump on into the first card. Up first, we have Aerial Guide. Aerial Guide is 2 and a blue for a creature Drake at common. It has flying. Whenever Aerial Guide attacks, another target attacking creature gains flying until end of turn. This seems pretty decent. It's a very solid creature in an aggressive deck, especially blue-white skies. It's a 2/2 flyer for 3, which is totally normal and playable, and being able to get your earlier ground creatures that are maybe outclassed into the air is definitely helpful, or something disgusting like a Colossipede. A solid mid-pack pickup that any blue deck wants and is going to be very happy to have. I'm going to go with a C+ on Aerial Guide. Aven Reedstalker is up next. Aven Reedstalker is 3 and a blue for a creature Bird Warrior at common. It's a 2/3 with flash and flying. This is a functional reprint of Nephalia Seakite from Dark Ascension, which was incredible in draft. This set is definitely shaping up to have a very aggressive bent to it, which you know how I feel about that after 3 straight sets of it. But this card will be key in an aggressive blue-white skies deck. Again, a solid not a B+, sorry, a C+. Being able to hold up interaction and then flash this in on turn 4 just seems super good. C+, might even push up into B-. We'll see if this sort of blue-white flyers deck is supported or not. Champion of Wits is up next. Champion of Wits is 2 and a blue for a creature Naga Wizard at rare. It's a 2/1, and when Champion of Wits enters the battlefield, you may draw cards equal to its power. If you do, discard 2 cards. Eternalize for 5 blue. This seems really quite good. On curve, you drop a 2/1 for 3, which is a little bit middling, but you get some serious card selection with a double loot. Then, later in the game, after this has gotten through for some damage, or chump blocked, or whatever, and you've got 7 mana, you get yourself a 4/4, draw 4, discard 2. Seems like a super solid utility creature. It's not a game-breaking bomb, but it seems like an easy B to me. I might first pick it. I'd probably take removal over it almost every single time, but after removal, I'd be pretty okay picking this up. So solid B for Champion of Wits. Well, it wouldn't be a Magic set without a counterspell, and a counterspell is up next. Countervailing Winds is 2 and a blue for an instant at common. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 for each card in your graveyard. Cycling for 2 generic mana. Now, we had this card in Khan's block minus the cycling, and it was called Rakshasa's Disdain. And it was bad, and that was in a set with Delve, where you were getting cards in your graveyard. You were milling yourself because you wanted to, use those to delve. The fail state here, of course, is that you have a counter spell that maybe doesn't even counter something. Now, later in the game, maybe this becomes unconditional if you've got 5 cards in your graveyard, but maybe it doesn't. The 2-mana cycle probably still makes this begrudgingly playable, but I'd be very careful about thinking, haha, I have a counter spell in my deck, because you may just not. I'm going to start this at a D+. I just feel like the fail state is way too low, so I'm going to start at D+. I'm going to do my best to not play this to begin with. Cunning Survivor is up next. Cunning Survivor is 1 and a blue for a creature Human Warrior at common. It's a 1/3. Whenever you cycle or discard a card, Cunning Survivor gets +1/+0 until end of turn, and can't be blocked. Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but small set syndrome is going to strike again here, I think. Blue has 3 cycling cards at common or uncommon, and we already just saw one. Black has a few, and how playable all of these are is questionable, as we saw with Countervailing Winds. So I have a feeling that the cycling deck is basically dead because so much of it is going to be locked up in that single pack of Amonkhet that you get in Draft, or the 2 that you get in Sealed. There's payoffs in this set, as we'll see, but you're going to have to scrounge in pack 3 a little bit, and that's not a good sign. It's kind of like Energy with Kaladesh, though potentially not as bad as that change was. So I'd be very, very careful about these effects until we get some more data from seeing this set drafted and actually played. Now, this card's mediocre anyways. If you go off with this, you get a 2/3 that can't be blocked a couple of times. Yeah, it's a C-. You'll play it if you need a 1/3 for 2, which sometimes blue is okay with, but otherwise you're gonna not play this. So C-. Eternal of Harsh Truths is up next. Eternal of Harsh Truths is 2 and a blue for a creature zombie cleric at uncommon. It's a 1/3. It has Afflict 2, and this is our first time seeing an Afflict. Afflict means whenever this creature becomes blocked, defending player loses 2 life. Whenever Eternal of Harsh Truths attacks and isn't blocked, draw a card. So it doesn't look like it, but this is still a Punisher card, as most Afflict cards are, giving your opponent full control on how the game goes. Odds are they're just going to block this and pretend that it's a bear attacking them, rather than let you draw a card. If you're at a point where they can't take 2, I feel like you're so close to winning the game anyways that it doesn't even matter. Ultimately, I think this reads way better than it's going to be. I think it's still playable, but I wouldn't go ham on it. I think there is enough going on here that I think I'll still play it pretty reliably at a C+, but I think it does read way better than it does, than it will actually be. So I'm going to go with a C+. I'm very cautious about a lot of these lower power Afflict creatures, just because giving your opponent that much choice is not great. There's some amazing Afflict creatures in this set for sure, but I don't think this is one that really goes too far above a C+. So C+ for Eternal of Harsh Truths. Fraying Sanity is some really cool art. It's 2 and a blue for an enchantment or a curse at rare. Enchant player. At the beginning of each end step, enchanted player puts the top X cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard, where X is the number of cards put into that graveyard from anywhere this turn. No. Just know this is a trap. If you want to go deep here, remember this will count things like instants and sorceries cast as well. But still, this is going to require some serious support for this to be anything other than an F in Limited. Constructed, I obviously want to see something done with this, but Limited, steer clear of this. There just isn't the support. And the fact that you're going to have to hope for your compelling arguments in the third pack, straight F on Fraying Sanity. The next hour is up, Hour of Eternity. Hour of Eternity is an XX blue sorcery at rare. Exile X target creatures from your graveyard. For each card exiled this way, create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. So you eternalize whatever number of creatures you want. So 5 mana to eternalize a single creature. Could be good, could not be. 7 for 2. Beyond that, you're just not in most limited matches of Magic. You're not going to get 9 mana in most games of Magic. A couple, sure, but not most. This is better than a straight Reanimate, because at least if you only have a 1/1 to target, you still get a 4/4 for 5. Whereas if it was, just Rise from the Grave or whatever, it's just a 1/1. But that's still pretty average, paying 5 mana for a 4/4. That being said, I feel like you do need some juicy targets for this. You need flyers, you need cool ETB effects, activated abilities, etc. And those cards need to have made their way to the graveyard. And you need a critical threshold of them. Still, this is one of those cards that I feel could go absolutely either way. So I don't know. I'm going to start it at a B-. I'll probably first pick it if I happen to open it in one of my first couple of drafts and see how it goes. But I'm prepared for it to be actually worse than a B-, potentially by a lot. But let's start at a B-. Next up is Imaginary Threats. Imaginary Threats is 2 blue for an instant at uncommon. Creatures target opponent's control attack this turn if able. During that player's next untap step, creatures he or she controls don't untap. Cycling for 2 generic mana. I don't think I care for this. Sure, there will be situations where you get to have your opponent attack and you just eat the board. But you'll also have situations where being flunged at is a horrible idea, maybe even ending the game not in your favor. In which case, you have a 2 mana draw card spell. I just don't like that because I think the awesome scenario is a lot rarer than the average to terrible scenario. I'll keep an eye on this, and I know that some people are going to absolutely love this because of the potential, but I'm going to start real low at a D+, and I'm going to let other people play this before I actually start giving it a try. So D+ to start on imaginary threats. The next of the defeat cycles is up. Jace's Defeat. 1 and a blue for an instant at uncommon. Counter target blue spell. If it was a Jace Planeswalker spell, scry 2. Yeah, as with Gideon's defeats and all of the defeats, this is simply not main deckable and should be taken very, very, very late. Even worse, if you're playing in pod, like you should, grumble, grumble leagues, the odds of being against another blue deck is rather low. But if you are against a blue deck, this is just a counter spell that's actually a little bit easier to cast against those blue spells. So this is just a straight up D, but I mean it even just kind of supersedes grades in the matchup where you're against blue, infinitely better than that. So, you know, do not main deck this. Do not main deck any of the defeats. Continuing on with cycles, we have Kefnet's Last Word. Kefnet's Last Word is 2 blue for a sorcery at rare. Gain control of target artifact, creature, or enchantment. Not Planeswalker, or land. Lands you control don't untap during your next untap step, as with all of the final moments of the gods cards. I like this one, I think, a fair bit. It does cost 8, technically, but unlike Lake Claim, which costs 7, you're not stuck unable to cast this if you don't have 8 mana. You will be able to cast this basically every single match. And 4 mana for a mind control is awesome. I'll pick this and play this highly until I see that this cycle is actually bad, and I don't actually think it is. Some of them, Oketra's Last Mercy, for example, are definitely bad. I think this one's really good. I'm going to start at a B on it. I think this is going to be real good, and I expect to be past them at the beginning of the format. So B for Kefnet's Last Word. Nimble Obstructionist is up next. Nimble Obstructionist is 2 and a blue for a creature bird wizard at rare. It has flash, it has flying, it's a 3/1, so it's basically Vendilion Clique. It has cycling for 2 and a blue, and if you cycle it, you counter target activated or triggered ability you don't control, so you stifle. There's a whole lot going on here. Now, I don't expect the cycling part of this to be used terribly much. Obviously, if you're in a fetch land format, stone raining your opponent sounds pretty darn good. But in this format, you're probably not going to get anything anywhere near that kind of value. Maybe a good ETB effect or something like that. The star of this is a 3/1 flash flyer for 3. I was excited by a 2/3 flash flyer for 4. This is just better if you're feeling nice and aggressive in the air. This is good enough for a B- for me. It does die if you look at it wrong, so I'm not going to go any higher than that. And it's going to feel amazing if you do stifle something real good. But I would not plan on that being the main way of going through with this. So don't get too high on this card, but I think it is just flat out good. B-. Ominous Sphinx is 3 blue for a creature Sphinx at uncommon. It's a 4/4 flyer. Cool. Whenever you cycle or discard a card, target creature an opponent controls gets -2/-0 until end of turn. As I talked about with Cunning Survivor, cycling's been hurt a little bit. We've now covered 2 of the common and uncommon cycling cards, and they've both been kind of meh. Nimble Obstructionist is great, but it's a rare, and we'll see if the other cycling card in blue is any good or not, and it's not great. The black ones are maybe a little bit better, but yeah, I don't know if the cycling discard deck is really going to exist in the same way that it did in Amonkhet. So the cycle or discard part of this, I don't expect to be something that you can even slightly count on with any real regularity. And even if you can, it's not really doing that much. It's saving you 2 damage a turn. That's not amazing. But beyond all that, this is a 4/4 flyer for 5. Which is typically what we get, and they do some serious work. This is a curve topper in a blue-white skies deck. This is a curve topper in a blue deck, period, and, you know, hit your opponent 5 times with this and they're dead. So I think this is totally fine. I'm going to put this at like a C+, B-, but I'm not going to go too deep on the cycling aspect of it. Proven Combatant is up next. It's a single blue mana for a 1/1 creature human warrior at common. No. It does have Eternalize, though. It's 4 blue to Eternalize it, turn it into a 4/4. So we have a 1/1 for 1. Utterly, totally out. A 1/1 for 1 that later becomes a 4/4 for 6? Probably still no. I feel like I'm going to slightly underestimate Eternalize's 2 creatures on 1 card value, which of course Embalm had, but this just seems like the absolute bottom of the barrel for that effect. I don't really foresee playing this ever if I can possibly help it. I would probably just play another land over this card, to be honest. I'm going to go with a D- on it. I don't think it's good. Riddle Form is up next. Riddle Form is 1 and a blue for an enchantment at uncommon. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may have Riddle Form become a 3/3 Sphinx creature with flying in addition to its other types until end of turn. Pay 2 and a blue, scry 1. You don't really play this outside of a red-blue spells deck, period. A 2-mana enchantment that does nothing until you start sinking mana into it, in which case it then scries, is awful in most formats, regardless of aggressive or not, let alone one that may potentially still be aggressive. Now, in that deck, this is a very nice mana sink, and you get some value in getting a 3/3 each time you cast a non-creature spell. So this is much more build-aroundy, and in that deck, I think it's kind of like a C+, B-. It's not like a build-around win the game. You know, it's not a Drakehaven or something like that, but it is still totally fine in that deck. Outside of that deck, straight F. Do not put this in just a blue deck because you might activate it once or twice. F. Seer of the Last Tomorrow is 2 and a blue for a creature Naga Cleric at common. It's a 1/4, pay a blue, tap it, and discard a card. Note the discard a card is part of the cost. It's not part of the effect, so you can't do this if you have no cards in hand. Target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. It's a mill card. And not a very good one at that. It is, however, maybe the saving grace of the cycling discard decks, because this is a single blue mana to discard any card. And that, I think, is why I'm going to keep a close eye on this. I still don't like it. I still don't like that plan. I'd significantly prefer cycling just to be more prevalent in blue in this set than it appears to be. But yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. I would absolutely not in any way, shape, or form go in on this as a plan for milling. Maybe if I pack one, picked one of Fraying Sanity, and I felt like having fun and not necessarily feeling like winning, I would potentially go in on this, because I bet I can probably pick up any number of Seer of the Last Tomorrows that are in the pod. But that's a fun plan. Not really a good plan. So I think I'm going to start this real low. I'm going to start this at like a D-. I'm going to keep a very careful eye on this as a discard enabler more than a miller. And yeah, maybe someday if I'm feeling real spicy and we get a pack one, pick one Fraying Sanity, I'll give it a shot. Until then, D-. Up next is Sinuous Striker. Sinuous Striker is 2 and a blue for a creature Naga Warrior at uncommon. It's a 2/2. Pay a blue, Sinuous Striker gets +1/-1 until end of turn. Eternalize it for 3 blue and blue. A 2/2 or a 3/1 for 3 is fine, though it requires an aggressive blue deck, especially with this not having any sort of evasion at all. Getting it back after it's, potentially traded or chumped or whatever, for 5 mana as a 4/4 that becomes up to a 7/1 is definitely a thing. This will definitely be format dependent and archetype support dependent, but this seems fine enough for me to be a relatively high mid-pack pick. I'm going to go with a B- on it. I think this could do some real serious work. These sort of blue for +1/-1 creatures are often a little bit underrated by people, so I think you might even get this a little bit later than you should, at least at the start of the format. So I'll start at B-, may even be a B, not sure yet. We'll find out. I like that the Eternalize cost is only 5. That's a lot lower than a lot of the Eternalize costs. Spellweaver Eternal is a 1 blue creature zombie Naga wizard at common. It's a 2/1 with prowess, and it has afflict 2. So it's a 2/1 for 2 that gets a final hurrah by being chumped and dealing 2 damage anyways, which is fine enough if you want some early aggression. Prowess does make this slightly more threatening, but it still trades down to an awful lot of things due to having the smaller starting toughness. Really, I think this is just a middle-of-the-road C. I think a C+ feels a bit too generous for it, so I'm going to go with a C for Spellweaver Eternal. Next up, we have Jason Gideon doing some strategic planning. Strategic planning is 1 and a blue for a sorcery at common. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 of them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. Sorcery speed, I said. That really, really, really hurts. Anticipate was similar-ish to this and rather playable in a slower format anyways. This, though, I'm not spending a turn to do this too often. If the format's really slow, and I don't think we're quite going to get there as much as I desperately, desperately want us to, then this could be slightly playable. But otherwise, the sorcery speed just demolishes this card's potential. I'm going to put this at a D-. It's too slow. If it was instant speed, boy, I'd be playing this probably every time, but sorcery speed, D-. Striped River Winder is some art ripped straight out of an anime CCG. 6 blue for a creature serpent at common. It's a 5/5 with hexproof, and you can cycle it for 1 single blue mana. 7 mana is an awful lot to ask for a 5/5 hexproof. That dies to a bear and a 3/3. That dies to a 3/3 and a combat trick. Cycling for a blue is okay and all, but I think I'm just not playing this 99% of the time. It's way too costly for the body. Look at the 6/7 hexproof that we got for 7. That's something that doesn't die to very much. This dies to a lot, unfortunately. So I'm going to go with a D on it. I'm just not going to play this very often. 7 mana is too much of an ask. Supreme Will is up next. Supreme Will is 2 and a blue for an instant at uncommon. Choose one. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. Mana leak. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This is literally just a better strategic planning. It's instant speed. For 1 more mana, you get to look at 1 more card, and the cards go on your bottom of your library instead of your graveyard. This is just better than that card that we just talked about. And if the situation's favorable, you get to just counter a spell. You know, assuming your opponent doesn't have 3 mana available. This just seems really good. I do have a slight soft spot for bad mana leaks that cost more than 2 mana, but this one gets around the downside of being bad in the later game by instead letting you dig relatively deeply and draw a card. This just seems really, really decent to me, assuming that we're actually going to be allowed to play games of Magic in this set. So hopefully we do. I'm going to start potentially a little bit high on this at a B. I just think this card's real good. It plays right into the kind of decks that I love to play and the kind of decks that I haven't really been allowed to play for the past year. So straight up B for Supreme Will. Swarm Intelligence is 6 and a blue for an enchantment at rare. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. This is bad. It's a 7 mana enchantment. 7 mana enchantments need to end the game. This is very far from doing that, especially in limited. You're going to have, you know my prowess argument here, you're going to have 4 instant or sorcery cards, 5 maybe. If you are in the blue-red spells deck, the deck that is going to have the absolute most amount of them, you're still doing nothing the turn you cast this. And then the turn after, you start copying your what? Your magma sprays? Your tap down cards? This isn't good. This is a trap. Don't touch this card. It's an F-. It is just unplayable, period. Up next is Tragic Lesson. Tragic Lesson is 2 and a blue for an instant at common. Draw 2 cards. Then discard a card unless you return a land you control to its owner's hand. This seems fine. It's kind of like flashbacking a Think Twice if you do discard a card, in which case you've just drawn a card. So it's similar to a flashback Think Twice in cost and half of the ability alone. And late in the game, returning a land may not even be that much of a downside. And you'll probably return, you know, the land that you tapped to help pay for this, and then play that as your land turn, or as your land drop for the turn. This just seems like it's really good to me, and I think it's going to be a solid weather vane for the format. If this is playable, it's because the format has slowed down way more to my liking. If this is not playable, it's because the format's just way too fast, and dirtling around and drawing cards instead of affecting the board is not good enough. I'm going to start this at a C+. Please let this be a C+. Unesh, Cryo Sphinx Sovereign, is 4 blue for a legendary creature Sphinx at Mythic. Unesh is a 4/4 flyer. Sphinx spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. Whenever Unesh Cryo Sphinx Sovereign or another Sphinx enters the battlefield under your control, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. An opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. Put 1 pile in your hand and the other into your graveyard. This just seems really, really beefy. Barring the fact that the Sphinx spell sentence is going to be probably meaningless in Limited. You know, there's, what, 1 uncommon Sphinx in this set? And in the other set we have 2 rares? And that's it? You're probably not going deep on Sphinxes. That being said, sorting cards into piles is often one of the hardest choices for an opponent to make and is prone to a ton of mistakes or suboptimal choices. Getting that effect plus a 4/4 flyer for 6 mana seems real nice. Still, it is double blue and 6 mana, so I'm not going to put it higher than an A-, but it's going to get an A-. Unesh looks real good to me. A-. Next up is Unquenchable Thirst. Unquenchable Thirst is 1 and a blue for an enchantment aura at common. Enchant creature. When Unquenchable Thirst enters the battlefield, if you control a desert or there is a desert card in your graveyard, tap enchanted creature. Enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. So, this is several cards that we've seen before, kind of all stapled together with varying steps. The non-desert side of this is really mediocre. Not tapping something down is a big problem, and we've seen that before. But you can still semi-reliably do this after being attacked or a creature was tapped to be activated or whatever, but you did have to get attacked for this to become better. And, you know, it's still okay. It's not great removal. It's the typical kind of mediocre blue removal. It's like a C- level. You don't go out of your way to put it in your deck. If you get the desert ability, this jumps up to like a B- or even a B. It jumps up to like Claustrophobia at only 2 mana, when typically we're paying 3 mana for that effect. We'll have to see how the desert thing goes. As I said, I don't expect it to be something that you count on happening. Just because I don't foresee you, A, having enough picks to spend on getting deserts to get multiples of them into your deck. B, I don't know about playing multiples in your deck because generally you're hurting your mana base to do so. We'll see. Ultimately, these Desert Matters cards, I think you play them for the non-desert side. And this one ends up being kind of C- or low C level on the non-desert side. So that's what we'll start it at. All right, everybody. We got there. Unsummon. Unsummon is a single blue mana for an instant at common. Return target creature to its owner's hand. I am so happy that Unsummon is back. I love bounce. Love it. And this is about as good as it can possibly get. A single blue mana for instant speed bounce. Oh, so good. For as aggressive as the set has looked so far, we get this, which can really reset things. Plus, with all the Eternalize going around, the Embalm that'll still be kicking around, killing a 6 or 7 drop creature for 1 mana? Oh, so good. I'll take these highly all day, every day. Straight up B. Yeah, that's probably a little bit inflated for my bias, but Unsummon is so good, guys, especially in a token format. Straight B. Unsummon is back. Our final card for blue, which for some reason gets 1 less card than white, is Vizier of the Anointed. Vizier of the Anointed is 3 and a blue for a creature, human cleric at uncommon. It's a 2/4. When Vizier of the Anointed enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a creature card with Eternalize or Embalm, put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. Whenever you activate an Eternalize or Embalm ability, draw a card. If a blue-white Eternalize Embalm deck still exists, this could be quite good. Having just a single pack, however, to get your Aven Wind Guides and such is going to make that a little bit tricky to be amazing. Well, it still seems good. Eternalize is also a pricey mechanic to go all in on because you're typically getting 5 to like 7 mana to Eternalize generally. So I'm not sure how much value you're going to get out of this reliably. I'm going to watch this card and this archetype as a whole very carefully. As is, it's a 2/4 for 4, which is playable as filler level for sure. And being able to go and get an Embalm or Eternalize, probably your best one, and throw it away is great. And then drawing a card is going to be good. So I think this is probably just good as long as you have a few targets. The downside, of course, like with tutors, is yeah, you can go and get your best card, but if you already draw it before you play this, then you have to go and get something really crummy or potentially nothing. So be careful on this, but I'm going to start it at a B-. If the deck is still there, this will go up a whole bunch more. If it doesn't, this will drop to more like a C+. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for the blue set review. Blue looks characteristically a little bit underpowered. I think Unesh, the Cryo Sphinx Sovereign, is probably one of the better cards here. But it's got some decent kind of mid-level sort of stuff. Like Champion of Wits looks really nice. I will make a promise that if I pack one, pick one, a Fraying Sanity at some point, if I have that option, I will go for it and have some fun with it. I don't expect to do well, but I will give it a try. So there's some fun stuff here. There's some cool stuff here. And come on summon, right? I'm going to play blue at least once and possibly 12 times. So yeah, let me know what you think of blue. Let me know what you think of all these cards. Are you happy that On Summon's back? Let me know in the comments down below. And of course, talk with me, talk amongst yourselves. That's the whole point of set reviews. If you do have any questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. You can find me on Twitter at @TheManaLeek. That's L-E-E-K like the vegetable, not the card. You can also find me at Facebook.com/TheManaLeek, Twitch.tv/TheManaLeek, and Patreon.com/TheManaLeek if you want to help keep the channel going there. If you like the content, click that thumbs up button. It helps the discoverability of my content. It doesn't just make me feel good, but it does make me feel good. If you're brand new, welcome. We've got set reviews going on all week. We've got pre-release content coming up, release content. We have weekly stuff, top 10 lists, etc. So click subscribe if you're new and you haven't already. And if you do have questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, see y'all tomorrow for the black set review.